Very much, and thank you for that opening statement. I think it is very heartening to see greater participation, and if I can, in that plan, if I can, could I ask, and you may want to take this on notice, where are the areas that students aren't participating in those year levels? So can you break it down in terms of school area?
It's something that we don't actually have specific details on in terms of that breakdown. We publish national data. We do publish data which can be broken down by subgroups, which those subgroups include state and territory.
Okay.
And so, therefore, we don't go down to locales or, in particular, individual schools looking at their percentages. If you go to the My School website, you will find individual information in terms of NAPLAN data relative to that school, which includes the participation at a school level. But we don't aggregate any of that data to a particular area.
Okay. Would there be any plans in future to possibly do that? I'm keen to see, particularly laying over socioeconomic challenges that some students have. It would be interesting to see if we're capturing them and making sure that they're participating.
Yeah, the participation can be broken down into some other subgroups, for instance, regional and remote. You can look at the location in terms of those categories that we use, large cities, medium density cities, regional and remote and very remote. So we do have that kind of breakdown that's available on our website, and we can send you that link to that information with some directions about how you could actually pull up that data. We could try and
pull that. Okay, thank you. Sorry, that was just a curiosity, and now we'll get to the actual questions. I guess it's fair to say that academic results of students has been declining over a number of years now, and we've got the new national curriculum, which was launched in 2022, if I'm correct. Has your body done any work or analysis in identifying which parts of the curriculum are meeting teaching objectives versus which ones aren't? Does that...
Yeah, I understand the question. I'm probably interested in the fact that it's fairly hard for us to monitor achievement in the curriculum. We can monitor literacy and numeracy, and obviously our questions that we write for NAPLAN are linked to the Australian curriculum, and in particular around literacy and numeracy. So we do have information in terms of how the questions perform, but we don't publish that information. But it is used at a school level by schools, because they receive a school and student summary report which allows them to look at a class or their whole school and to actually identify the components of literacy and numeracy that their students are not fully achieving. And so that type of level of analysis is probably most appropriate for the school. And then in terms of whether the Australian curriculum is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, I think we just keep monitoring that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that it's maybe not performing as we would like, given that student results are declining? So we're spending more than we ever have on education in Australia, but we're just not seeing kids achieving maybe what we would hope they could achieve.
Well, I gather that schools have their own targets to try and improve the literacy and numeracy level of students in their school. And states and territory education authorities likewise have programs in place to try and do that. So I do believe that lots of efforts are being put into trying to make those improvements. For us at ACARA, we're looking at the national results, and since we changed the the actual scale in 2023, introduced proficiency levels. We've now got proficiency levels which are giving us more and better information at a national, a state and territory, and at a school level. So I wouldn't be surprised to see an increased focus on students, for instance, around the needs additional support and developing being undertaken at lots of different levels.
Okay. Sorry, yes.
If I could just add to that. So ACARA's role is around the curriculum and its national assessments, but the implementation of the curriculum is a matter for states and territories. So while the curriculum was agreed in 2022, it is not yet at full implementation across the country because when that decision was made, there wasn't a detailed implementation plan. So the curriculum is an important part of student learning, but also is having the workforce that is well equipped and also having classrooms that are ready and strong for learning. So in the previous part of the evidence, today we've been talking a little bit about the work we've been doing around supporting the workforce, to strengthen the workforce, as well as the work to build the capacity in schools. So they're the other components.
Fantastic. In your view, do you think the curriculum is too broad? I mean, we've got things like cross-curriculum priorities that have to go into, numeracy, literacy subjects that aren't necessarily related to those things. And this is just from speaking to teachers where they find that difficult because they're trying to lift, as you've said, schools and states are trying to lift numeracy and literacy, but there are these sort of cross-curriculum priorities. Has anyone done any assessment on that as to whether that has been helpful or a hindrance to teachers and students?
Well, can I first comment that the Australian curriculum and the revision of the Australian curriculum has gone through an extensive consultation process, and that consultation process was at a number of different levels and it was open to public consultation as well. So consideration of the structure of the Australian curriculum would have been taken on board at that point. It's important to remember that the Australian curriculum for teachers has two components which they really need to be looking at for their particular subject area or year group, and they are the curriculum content and the achievement standards. All of the other material is actually supportive material, including the elaborations. The cross-curricular priorities are priorities that have been agreed to after the meeting in the agreement in Northern Territory in Partwee, and I suppose they are again appropriate for certain learning areas. So it's not an expectation that teachers teach those cross-curricular priorities specifically, but take opportunity to actually address some of those when it's appropriate in the content that they're teaching and the context that they're using to teach their particular students. So I sort of think that our consultation process has allowed us to actually focus on the content, improving the content, reducing the amount of content and making it very clear. And it's those supporting materials and how to use those is the aspect that we're trying to get across in terms of our supporting advice.
Okay, thank you. And then just moving to, I guess, a slightly different, looking at the performance of boys within the curriculum. I've got a young son myself and two daughters, and it is, we're seeing females going into university. That's been increasing for a number of decades now, and we're at over 60%. I guess I'm just wondering, is there anything that's been deliberately done to try and engage with boys in the curriculum review that you've done, or are we trying to capture them through NAPLAN differently? Because I think it's fair to say parents are worried about boys being left behind.
Thank you, Senator. I think that the curriculum is addressing the needs of boys and girls, and so I think that has been considered in the review. But it's important to note that the difference in achievement of boys and girls over time has actually been fairly consistent. Since 2008, when we first had national data on those differences, we did observe a difference, especially in literacy of girl performance versus boy performance. We've now been able to go down to proficiency levels in the last 3 years, and again, we're seeing those consistent differences between boys and girls. So this is
sorry, I'm conscious of time, but I accept there are differences, but are we doing anything to try and bring boys up?
That's probably the role of the states and territory education authorities.
Yep, okay, thank you. And then this is my last question. Just looking at classical education, and it is something that is, I guess, an emerging movement that's happening in Australia, and classical education internationally has shown quite strong outcomes for students. Is there anything that ACARA is doing in terms of looking at aspects of classical education that can be incorporated into the national curriculum?
Can you provide some more details on classical?
So the things like the importance of grammar, logic, rhetoric, the types of texts that students get to read, like we're talking classical pieces of poetry, literature, very rich. You know, they're learning Latin, they're learning critical thinking, that ties in with music. There's an outdoor focus, less dependency on screens and technology. Is that something that you're looking at as something to put into the curriculum, noting that the standards are falling?
Thank you, Senator, for that articulation. I'll hand over to Mrs. Tully.
Yeah, sure,
yes,
thank you.
So Catherine Tully, Executive Director, Curriculum. In regard to the curriculum, teachers make selections about the types of texts that their students engage with. So certainly the Australian curriculum English references that encourages teachers to use a variety of texts. So teachers in individual schools and classrooms will make those decisions around which particular text they choose to use. Okay. In terms of monitoring trends that are emerging, and I think that's what you've referenced in regards to classical education, screen time, etc., ACARA engages in a monitoring process around the Australian curriculum. As you mentioned, this last curriculum approved in 2022. It is our plan from 2026 to engage in a monitoring process. That monitoring process we are currently building with the University of Queensland and consulting on that with our stakeholders. But generally a monitoring process includes a literature review, international benchmarking and comparison as well. So and sort of media monitoring as well. So once we get into that phase, that's a big part of the work of the curriculum team and would inform any future.
And would you consider looking at how classical schools perform versus traditional schools in an Australian context?
Take that suggestion on board, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.